Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Telecom Tuesday, where we go over the things that happened in our crazy industry. And this week, a little bit less crazy. Well, there's still some crazy, but it was a tame week. It was a short week. This might be a quick episode, but there's still some stuff to announce. So I guess we'll just go ahead and get started. So the first thing to talk about is the FCC. It's always a good thing when the FCC stands up for the little guy, which is you and me. Essentially, they created it's Section 222, of course, because you'll recall that by name so easily, which is essentially an act on internet service providers that requires them to get consent from their customer base before selling information about the way they use their internet connection to third parties. And that's important because we need that protection for ourselves, because otherwise they can just kind of monitor and identify how we do things, how we deliver things, and what all we do on the internet. Now, they wouldn't be selling like transactional stuff, like they wouldn't be saying necessarily that you bought this device from Amazon, all that's encrypted, but they probably can see that you went to Amazon. They probably can see that you like going to websites that are tech related or golf related or whatever it is, and then use that information to then sell to another party where they would sell it to you. So that's pretty much been happening already. And the FCC is basically saying, no, you can't do that, at least not with their permission. The customer has to know that you're doing this because that's not part of the service you're providing. That's in contrast to people like Facebook and Amazon, Facebook and like Twitter and other social media, where you basically are their product, and pretty much out of the gate, the privacy, consents to you being the product. You are what's being sold. You're what's being marketed to. They say it much nicer than that, but that's what's happening. Since your internet service provider doesn't come with any kind of expectation like that, they have to deliver that expectation to you. So that's a good thing. There's some scrutiny here on the context in which an internet service provider has to make you do that. Some websites I read were praising it, saying, "Oh, this is great. Now a carrier has to explicitly ask you, hey, do you want this checkbox, yes or no?" But I think that there's nothing really written into the statute for the Communications Act that says how they have to deliver this. So it could be that in the middle of you signing that contract that's 8 pages long or longer, they just add a subtle terms and conditions in there that say you consent us to getting your stuff. And the next time your stuff renews, I'll just add it in there, and no difference to us. And what are the odds of us being able to fight that? Pretty much zero. But I can't really say one way or another if we have to fight it or be loud about it or do something about it, because we don't know how they're going to do it. Maybe they'll play nice. So we'll see. So that's the very first story. Next is a conversation about Google's cloud versus AWS, and I'll talk a bit about Azure as well, even though that's not part of the discussion. But essentially, the companies came out with their revenue and profit totals for the quarter. And Google's up. Google's doing good, better than expected on a whole, making like $5 billion in profit. I think it's on the screen, which is good. I don't really know exactly how much of that is from cloud services. Oh, actually, maybe I do. So fourth quarter cloud services revenue was under $1 billion. So which is up. So they're under $1 billion though for a quarter, which puts them at probably about $3 billion for the year. On average, and Amazon I think does around $4 to $5 billion a year, and I'm not sure what margin Google is getting from that. It's important to know that included in that number though from Google is like their Google Business apps, which a lot of people use and have used since before AWS was even a thing. So it's not a completely fair comparison. Not all of that money came from people who are using like cloud-hosted services or other things as a service, but it is technically software as a service, so I get why they would show the revenue that way. Amazon is doing great. They've made I think $1.5 to $2 billion in profit in the year so far. Maybe that was last year, and they really are doing great. yeah, still stronger, still the number one provider of software as a service and cloud services. Most of this is about the cloud platforms. And AWS is kicking ass. And so you have AWS followed quickly by Azure, which I'm not sure why no one's talking about Azure yet. We must not have the financials from Windows, Microsoft. But if I had to guess, Microsoft's doing well, and it's better than Google. But Google has probably made a bigger strive, and Microsoft's focus as far as like public attention isn't right this second, facing towards the business side. They just had their announcement last week where they released their new like Surface Studio, which, my God, if this wasn't a telecom podcast, I would be totally geeking out over that because it seems so awesome. But the point is, they're not in this mindset yet of pitching to us. That being said, I work a lot with Microsoft in my day job, and I can tell you that they're touting all of their partners: cloud this, cloud that, cloud everything. Move to as a service, move to Skype Online, move to Exchange Online, move to SharePoint Online, online everything. And just like Google has put up their stuff as a software as a service, their Google Business Apps, I'm positive that Microsoft is going to do the same thing to show related numbers that would be on the same scale as Google. I don't know what Amazon offers that's similar in that bank. I know they have some like virtual desktop infrastructure stuff that Amazon provides, but it's not really, it's not like an apps or an Office 365 or something similar to that. They don't really have that. So, in my opinion, we might see in a couple of years that Microsoft and Google peak up, match, or surpass Amazon in the cloud platform world, but I don't think it's going to be a true surpassing. I think Amazon is going to continue to grow and be the leader, at least for a while, in the actual cloud infrastructure space. But Microsoft and Google have a suite of apps that they can sell, and they have been selling, and they will continue to sell. That's going to show them a lot more profit. So I guess my moral is take the numbers with a grain of salt, because I think Google and Microsoft might be cheating a little bit when it comes to these articles that say, oh my God, Google is beating Amazon, or Google's on track to beating. Don't think it's going to happen. I think it's sort of an illusion that they're trying to get you to do, and I'm positive that Amazon's still super strong. Okay, so last week the only thing we talked about Samsung was the game that had a copyright strike against it, GTA 5, for using the Samsung phone that exploded. As funny as that was, just wanted to briefly touch on the news now. A lot of people were wondering, okay, how bad is this going to be for Samsung? The fact that the Note 4 literally explodes. And people were wondering, is this the end of Samsung? Is no one going to recognize the brand anymore? Is it going down the toilet? I've basically been saying from the beginning, no, it's not the end for Samsung. Samsung sells everything from televisions to jet engines to microwaves to like helping with parts in cars and stuff. Like, they do a ton of stuff. So Samsung as a company, I believe the mobile industry is just a very small percentage of them as a company. So they'll be fine. But now we know it's going to cost they estimate about $3 billion in loss. And their company's profit as a whole dropped almost 17%, which is a bigger impact than I expected, and I think a lot of people expected. And I'm pretty sure that their stock's going to notice a big dip too. But let's see here. So it says here that the quarter they made an operating profit, which is way lower than what they did. It says you're 96% under of last year. I mean, 87.9 million for a company as big as Samsung is like, it might as well be a loss or a wash or a break even, or almost within the margin of error for accounting. Because you start dealing in the billions and billions and billions across all of these different verticals, opportunity there arises. I'm sure they're careful. They have to be. It's a publicly traded company. They have to follow best practices, but still not a lot. $3 billion loss and still, having some kind of operating profit is good. It means that Samsung is going to have the ability to bounce back, in my opinion. A lot of articles you're going to read are going to say Samsung's screwed, no one's ever going to buy Samsung again. I don't think so. Samsung has to take this as an opportunity to pivot. And a lot of the business stuff I talk about, I use pivoting a lot because it has to be something, as a person you run business, it has to be good at pivoting. So they have a main brand, the Note 7, that the Note series in general, in fact, the Galaxy series is at risk here because the name was attached to it. They have to pivot. They have to differentiate it. They have to apply it in a more unique way than they were before, probably with a new generation. And my guess is that Galaxy, that brand, is probably going to stop at 7. We're going to see a new thing from Samsung, and that's going to be their make or break. And I'm certain they're going to have something. I don't know how much they're going to be willing to invest in it, given the loss, and given how much differentiated they are in their market as a business. So we'll see what they do. And more fun with AT&T, because AT&T sucks. You may have heard from the blogosphere that, over the last decade or so. Decades. As long as telecom providers have been a thing, people who provide phone and internet service to consumers, there's been wiretapping. And there's been government-required tapping and government-required, like subpoenas. So the government would request for data on a particular person's phone records. How long did they talk with whom? How frequently do they talk? They need to gather all this information. And by law, telecom providers have to provide that to them. So if there's due process in the court system, that court system then moves up, approves, says, okay, we're good. Here's a warrant. If they need it for wiretapping, they do need a warrant. But for information gathering, they just need a subpoena, and I think some like probable cause, some reason to want the information to investigate further. Relatively easy to get that stuff, and the telecoms have to provide any information they have. So you can't hold it too much against them for having to do this. What you can hold against them is a company who sees that as a profit-making opportunity. So AT&T literally created something called Hemisphere deep down in its organization. So this was not public. This was something very private between the government and AT&T. And essentially Hemisphere is a product that AT&T has that does a really, really, really good job of going through all AT&T documents and voice and data transactions of users that they need to investigate and gather information on. So, whereas before the government would ask for information about who's this guy talking to, and they'd get maybe an unfiltered list of raw data that the company provided, AT&T has gone through and basically sorted, organized, created a filtration system, and then wrapped a product around that, and then sold it to the government. And I think early in the days it was selling it for like $20,000 a year for use in like certain departments locally, and it just, once they realized how much the government wanted it and used it, it went up to like $100,000. So they're raking in dough out of using this tool. And at this point, I'm not very confident that they had to have a subpoena. I think that they just gave this to the government, and the government could use it whenever they wanted to snoop around what's happening in their environment or in their jurisdiction. And that's crossing a line. Although I'm sure anytime a police department looks up something, they look it up with just cause. But making it that easy to violate our privacies is something that I don't like to see from companies I do business with. It's one thing to say that they had to. If you look up some, what's that court called? The FISA court or the, I can't remember. There's a secret court that basically, out of public eye, can create warrants. And these warrants are usually handed to companies like Yahoo, hence their scandal. I think it's the FISA court. It's like the Yahoo scandal that, the government requested them something, but it was classified. It's not something for the public to know. So that court will dish out orders to Yahoo, Microsoft, even places like Reddit and communities that you guys may go to on a day-to-day basis. And what's happened is, because the companies can't tell you that they have been requested for this information, they want to do us a service, though, and make sure we're as informed as legally possible, as much as they can actually do. So they'll actually put in their terms and conditions a line that says, we have not been requested by X, Y, or Z court to provide any information about our users. And the reason it's in there is because the moment they get asked, That is then false. So they would, in order to be true to their customers and legally be honest, they have to go through and remove that line from the terms and conditions and thereby force everybody to go and re-accept the new terms and conditions. So that is the only way that people can let you know that they've been asked to do it. And that's awesome. Companies that have that foresight to offer that information to you, it may only be a one-time thing. They may only be able to do it one time. But that shows that the company cares. Giving up information when the government asks for it without fighting, a little bit wishy-washy. I'd rather see a company fight. Yahoo fought once, failed, lost millions of dollars in that stuff, and chose not to fight the second time. Other companies like Google fight frequently. But doing that is good. Not fighting is better than what AT&T did, which is literally see an opportunity to make a profit on what the government is asking you for. And while that in itself isn't a bad thing, especially not a bad business mindset to be in, like, okay, if the government needs me to give X, Y, or Z information, I might as well see if I can spin a way to make a profit off of it because you see a business need. That's fine. The problem is you have a company who is taking your personal information, your private records, and openly sharing that with the government for profit. That is bad. That is really bad. And I think I said it last week. I have a saying where all service providers suck. You just have to find the one that sucks least for you, and usually least for you in your area. I'm pretty firm on saying this now that AT&T sucks the most. I don't care what service they're offering you, especially if you're a business. If this is the way AT&T does business and handles your information, if you are a business owner and you had some kind of legal litigation against a third party, and the government had to get involved, if that's all the government needed to do to dig more into your private documents, private information, private transaction information that has in no way affects your case, but they get it. And they may find some other things interesting about you, like why are you communicating overseas? Who knows what they could find to give you a hard time about. The fact that that's there makes them awful. So if you have a choice, and a lot of people don't have choices, which is another big problem in this dang country, don't use AT&T. I'm just going to say it. They have great service sometimes, so does everybody. But until this is fixed, no. Take your money elsewhere. Speak with your wallet. If you don't give them money, they can't get away with stuff like this. And sadly, that's it. This was a really short episode. I'm sorry. Normally I like to go at least like 30 minutes long, but it was just a short news week. Maybe I missed something. If I missed something, please leave a comment down below. If you want to be a guest on my show, also please leave a comment, shoot me a message, or comment on the channel. Do whatever you need to do. Hit me up on Twitter @TheChrisMorin, and we will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.